route.
Well, I always find it interesting that a male writer chooses a female as the prime character, and not only in this book, but in your reader-directed work, which we'll talk to. Is there a reason? Did you do it for marketing, for the reader that would be reading it, as opposed to the storyline? Or?
I'm not nearly that clinical with my writing process. Actually, part of it has to do with what I find as interesting characters that have not been done before. I'm a huge fan of Joss Whedon, and one of the questions he's often asked is, why do you constantly write strong female characters? And his answer always is the same, which is because you keep calling them that. I don't think of them as strong female characters, they're strong characters. And so for a lot of my writing, it's often been a case of, how can I make this character more interesting than what's already out there? For example, with Bastion, there's a lot of survival movies that have, Channing Tatum as the main military guy, and I said, let's twist it up. Let's cast a woman in that role. And what's interesting, I have a friend who's a Marine pilot, and she does a lot of my fact checking for me. And when I was writing, I sent her a chapter, and she sent back a note that said, "Is the entire officer crew of your plane men?" And I said, yes, hesitantly, because I knew that for her it's a big deal to have risen through the ranks and command her own squadron. And I thought, oh, is she going to yell at me for not having a woman in the flight deck? And she said, no, that's accurate. It's very uncommon to find a woman on the flight deck of a plane. There's not that many of us in here, and it drives me nuts that there aren't. And so I made a point of actually, before I went to final draft, to change one of the pilots over to kind of say, hey, yeah, this should be a little more ideal than what's really going on, and to give that character some more depth.
Well, it occurred to me, of course, I always, really do this deep thinking and try and pick it all apart, but I was thinking from a psychological standpoint, women in this day and age are much more strong characters, just by virtue of us working more in the workplace than perhaps 50 years ago, say, where women were more effeminate, more totally, reserved as a rule. So much more difficult for a man, to write a woman character, whereas today, women are very sarcastic and cocky, and so it fits that kind of a strong role. Would you agree with that? There's more fuel for fodder there, so to speak?
I think that we're more accepting of women who break the norms than we were. And I think if you look over the last 50 years, the words that we use to describe women who are outgoing, who are strong-willed, who are commanding, who demand respect, have shifted. Before we would use words that I'm not sure I can say here to describe them. Now we refer to them as strong-willed or assertive, as opposed to bossy.
Right.
That's one of the ones I've heard, because I have a daughter and we do a lot of reading about parenting.
I don't know, I'm still called bossy. Is that like a forbidden word? Because I'll let people know that.
Well, one of the things that they brought up in raising daughters is that when a little girl asserts herself on the playground, we refer to her as being a bossy little girl, whereas a boy is just being assertive.
Being a boy.
Or boys will be boys. And so it's little things in our dialogue where I know 50 years ago, it would have been, why are you encouraging her to do that? She doesn't need that skill. And now we have pretty much women running all kinds of companies.
Right.
We have I believe it's the chief financial officer of Google is a woman. Marissa Mayer runs Yahoo now, and has been all over the news with what she's been doing. So I think there's a much more even playing field these days.
Well, and you're a teacher.